Morning, everybody. My name is Monty van Staden. I'm 46 years old, and today I thought I'll just share my life story with you guys. And the reason I'm sharing this is I think in the times that we are caught up, a lot of people are giving up hope and surrendering their lives to something that's beyond their control. And I'm going to start off by saying that I was born in 1974 into a very dysfunctional family. Both my parents were alcoholics. I had two brothers and two sisters, all who ended up either in foster care or children's homes or institutions of some sorts, due to the fact that both my parents were alcoholics. At the stage, I was the only child living with them, and I had to learn to fend for myself. So from a very early age, shoplifting and stealing became a way of life. I could shoplift and steal before the age of 5, before I could even read and write. There are quite a few significant things that I'm going to highlight in this short video for you. And at the same time, I just want to say to you, when I go, it's giving me time to breathe and just to think about what I actually want to say to you. Because of my, because of the way I grew up, I was exposed to a lot of things. I was exposed to verbal abuse, physical abuse. My mom and dad used to have a game called Tag Your It, and they used to panel beat the living daylights out of each other. Both of them handing out as good as they could get. And very often I had to hide or find a safe place for myself. And the safe place for myself was on the streets of Pretoria. When I was about 5.5, 4.5, 5.5, my father got sentenced to Pretoria Central for culpable homicide. He drove into a car which was transporting petrol, and the people inside the car burnt out. During this time, my mom had an extramarital affair, and her boyfriend at the time raped me. When I went in to go and show my mom my bleeding bum, her response was, "Just go wash yourself," which at the time didn't have any significant meaning to me. But in retrospect, obviously, that's not the ideal way of dealing with the situation. By the school-going age, when I was my first year of school, I attended 9 different schools in Pretoria itself, and we moved around quite a lot. So I never really settled down. By the end of my first year of school, we moved to a place called King Williamstown, and I was subsequently taken away from my parents because of their neglect, and I was placed into my first foster care home. First foster care home, I don't want to say too much about them, but I've got scars all over my body because they thought they could change my habits, and my habits being stealing and lying, obviously. And they used to panel beat me, and in retrospect, once again, I could become angry, I could be upset, but they didn't know any better, and I don't think, or maybe they did know better. It's just at the time it was a bit overwhelming for them. And when I reached the age of 10, they eventually gave up and sent me to a place of safety in Port Elizabeth, Protea Place of Safety. And Protea Place of Safety is a place where young children go for the interim, so that the government can decide where they need to get placed. And normally that process takes about 3 months, 4 months. I was there for a year and a half, and eventually I landed up with another family, which was very nice. They were very young, and unfortunately, those habits that were formed in my formative years carried on with me, and I never really learned how to ask for things or to take responsibility. So I was there for about a year, And eventually the couple decided that they can't do this anymore either. And I was sent back to Protea Place of Safety in Port Elizabeth. And at that time I was 11 years old, turning 12. And I stayed there for a while. And then they sent me to a children's home in King Williamstown. And in King Williamstown, all was well, I thought. But apparently I couldn't function without a male figure in my life. So within that process, I'm just going to pause this video quickly because there seems to be a fire again. Sorry about that. We had a fire here not too long ago and it nearly burnt down all the houses. But it seems like somebody's just burning some rubble. Anyway, they thought that I would do better in a house that had a male figure in it. So I moved from the children's home into a townhouse, a children's home townhouse. And no, that didn't last very long because I was caught stealing. Well, not caught, I gave myself up. Stealing out of the school's tuck shop. And they had to make a decision as to if I could stay there because obviously I was an influence on the other kids. At this stage I was 14, 15 years old, and they couldn't find a place for me to stay, and they moved me to the school's hostel. And in the school's hostel, everything went well, I thought. And at the stage, I was introduced to another family through some class friends of mine, and they asked me if I would like to come and stay with them, and I did. So that was foster care home number 3. I ended up finishing school with them, and they taught me quite a lot. They taught me about responsibility and taught me about social responsibility and accountability, if one wants to call it that. Unfortunately, my little habits that were formed in my formative years, I can only blame it on my formative years, carried on with me. So even with them, I stole money from them. I did naughty things, if one wants to call it that. Just want to, in this period, when I came to King Williamstown in the children's home, I started experimenting with drugs at the place of safety, not drugs, marijuana, and every now and then I would use, which went right through my high school career, and everybody always just thought I was naughty or I drank too much. And in standard 9 I was introduced to a girl who was smoking buttons, and I started smoking buttons as well. Buttons is Mandrax. Mandrax is I don't know, it's a sleeping tablet, I think. I used quite regularly, with intervals obviously, but nobody ever saw it as a problem. I then was enrolled into the army. Back in the day it was still compulsory. I wasn't called up, but my foster care father thought it would be a good thing to teach me some discipline, and I went to the army for a year. During that time, I was introduced to the world, if one wants to call it that, and I made friends with people that were using much more stronger substances, stronger stuff than I was accustomed to, and very quickly I became addicted, if one wants to call it that. And strange how it happens. It's not like I went out looking for it. It's just there. But after the army, one of my friends from the army told me that there's a way of making some quick money, and who's not out to make some quick money. So I said, yeah, no, I'm keen. And he said, all we have to do is deliver ganja or weed from one place in Joburg to another place. So we go pick up and we drop off, and it's not huge amounts. It was bankies, it was arms, and money was good. I got like 2,000, 3,000 rand a week, so it was good. And at this stage, they asked me to go and drop something off in Kroonstad, and along the way, I got a flat wheel, and stopped the car, took out the wheel, and went to take out the wheel, and in the back of the car there was guns and coke, and I got a fright. I got a big fright because it wasn't a small amount of coke. I think it was about 4 or 5 kgs at a time, and there was quite a few guns. And when I asked my friend about this, he says, "But you've been doing it for some time now. You've been driving around in a stolen car. You've been dropping off the car at a place, and you've come back. What do you think people pay you for?" So my mind went a bit moggy, and there was another run I had to do to Bloemfontein, and I opened the boot and I saw all this coke lying there, so I thought I was going to make a duck for it. They won't catch me. And I ran with the car, and about 750,000 rands worth of drugs. And came back to King, apologized and introduced myself to my foster care family again, who helped me find a place to stay and got me a job, and everything was hunky-dory. But in the interim, before I had a place to stay, I stayed in their house, and I was working at a video shop at the time. And the people that I was working for, which was a syndicate, came to the shop. They found me, and they put a gun in my mouth, and they told me I've got a choice. I either give them the 750,000 rand or give them the coke. Luckily for me, I didn't spend much of I didn't get rid of much of the coke, so most of it I could replace. But there was an amount that I couldn't replace, which I had to repay. And during that time, I was still staying with my foster care parents, and I started frauding their checks. So, the one day, the uncle comes to me with a check with my name written on it and 1,200 rand amount, and he asked me, "What is this?" And I said, "It's a check." And long story short, he says he gave me an option. He gave me an option of paying the money back or paying the consequences. And I said, "All right, just give me some time and I'll pay the money back," which never happened. The one day he came looking for me. I didn't go to work. I was hiding away at a friend's house. And he says he's got no choice now but to go and lay a criminal charge. And he went and laid the criminal charge. I subsequently was picked up, not arrested, I was picked up, and I was taken to court. And while standing in court, I tried to justify, explain why I wrote the check, and I said it was something about rent or whatever. But in actual fact, it was paying the guys of the syndicate back. And I was using my hands, and I was explaining like one does when one is in trouble. And the magistrate told me because his son was in school with me, crazy, but his son was in school with me. He said, just keep your hands still, I just want to see them. And then he sent me out, and I came back, and he says, "I know what your problem is, you're a drug addict. Therefore, we're not going to sentence you, but we're going to sentence you to rehab." And I went to my first rehab in Magalieshoort. I was put under a section, and went to Magalieshoort. I stayed there for about 2 months, a month maybe, and I ran away because it wasn't really for me there. It wasn't really something that I was into. I didn't think I had a problem, firstly, and secondly, I didn't enjoy the whole environment. And when I came back, I started reading up about sections, and a section is only valid in a province that it's given. So I decided to move to the Western Cape, and I moved to Knysna, and when I moved to Nice, I moved back to my second foster care parents, who opened their home and welcomed me in. And a long story short, they eventually asked me to leave as well because my drugging just became a problem. I left weed all over my room, and I had a younger brother there that they felt I could influence as well. And yeah, in the meantime, I started working as a chef. I qualified as a chef in the army. I started working as a chef at the Protea Hotel. I was first at a little restaurant, and me and the owner had an altercation, and I got fired basically. But in the process, his friend, who was the executive chef at the Protea Hotel, really liked what he saw in me, and he offered me a position at the Protea Hotel. And eventually I started working at the Protea Hotel, and everything went well. I did in-house training, and things went well. And then I actually stopped using for a while. Then I started using again, and obviously lost the plot. And just before I could officially qualify, I left and I walked and I started roaming the streets. I didn't have a place to stay, I didn't have anywhere to go, so I became a nomad, living wherever I could, sometimes living in bubble wrap, sleeping in bubble wrap in the streets, slept in the gardens in Cape Town by the Parliament, and life was fun. And at the stage, I came back, I was on one of my missions, and I came back to Knysna, and I didn't have a place to stay, so I slept under the 7-Eleven back then, and I ran out of drugs. I ran out of the stuff that I was using. So I decided, I had a friend that was living in town, and I knew where his spare keys was. Long story short, I took his car and I drove to go and fetch drugs. I couldn't find any, and eventually I landed up stealing his car. I drove the whole of South Africa flat with a car and selling dagga. I had about 8 bags of dagga on me. How I got the dagga was in a Transkei. We drove past a horse and we hijacked the horse and swapped the horse for dagga. I didn't have any money, but the horse was valuable where I took him to. So subsequently I got arrested for motor vehicle theft out of a motor vehicle, fraud and housebreaking, and got sentenced to 5 years. And while sitting in the holding cells, I always played rugby, I always did sports, and I had a police friend come to me and ask me, Monty, why are you here? And I explained to him that it's actually about drugs, it's not about anything else. And he said, no, don't worry, I'll get you help. And don't know how it happened or who made it possible, but I landed up going to a rehab in Sedgefield called Serenity Care Centre, and they transferred my 5-year sentence that I was going to do in jail. They transferred to the centre, so I ended up doing a 5-year stint at Serenity. I was under the impression that it was only a year, but when I finished that year, they told me no, it's another 4 years, which I had to stay. And long story short, I ended up being at Serenity for 5 years. I trained as a lay counsellor, started helping people, and after the 5 years were finished, I decided I had enough. I've got my freedom back and I need to go. And my saying was, in the NA book, it says that there are those unfortunate few that never recover. And I always told my therapist, I'm one of them. I'm never going to stop using. And you can keep me here for as long as possible. I'm gonna keep on using. And truth, Bob, I kept to my word. The day that my sentence expired, I went and bought drugs and I went and bought alcohol, and I got sloshed. I got totally out of it. So, yeah, life went on. I went back to being a chef. I first waited for a while, then I started working in different restaurants. And at a stage, I had an altercation with one of my executive chefs, and I decided, stuff this. I don't need society. I'm gonna live on the outskirts. I'm gonna become a hobo. And I did. And I remember the one day I was totally like totally out of it. And I was sitting in a corner somewhere in Neisner, and I was looking at this church across the road where I thought that if I can make a connection with God, I'll be okay. I'll be fine. And I went to the church, and the pastor said to me, "Son, I'm sorry, man, but I can't pray with you. You're not part of the church." And at that time, my immediate thought was that even God deserted me. And this little boy came past me, and he said, "Yes, Monty, because he knew me from somewhere, you look really bad." And I contacted Lynn. And I went back. She opened up another rehab in Wilderness somewhere. Lynn was the director of Serenity Care Center. And she said, "No, Monty, come back. We're going to make a plan." And I went there, and I was okay. I think I was okay. And then something happened where a bunch of drug addicts together, always scheming about things, always planning about things. We decided to rob a tourist bus, a British tourist bus. And there was three of us. One of them pulled out eventually, but two of us went together. And we decided in the interim we changed, or I changed my mind. And the other dude was still very adamant about doing what we were doing. The reason I was going to rob a tourist bus is because I got deported out of England. I flew in and I flew out, basically, because my visa wasn't correct, wasn't done properly. And I went there for a girl, and my heart was broken because I couldn't go, and she went, and our relationship was over. And long story short, on this little tourist bus mission, I decided, well, I actually prefer being a bum, a nomad, if one wants to call it that. And I went and slept in a cave in Buffalo Bay. Not Buffalo Bay, Brenton-on-Sea. And at some stage, the guy that was with me came with a set of keys, and he says, I found a car. And but he couldn't reverse. So we went around the parking lot trying to figure out which car belongs to the key, and we were pressing the button, and eventually the bucket was in a Isuzu bucket, went boop, boop, and I reversed the car, and we drove. And we didn't know where we were going, but the person that I was with said he had a contact in Cape Town that he could sell the car to, and we could make some money and then start living off that. And in the process, we got to Cape Town, got his connection. His connection said no, but the connection referred us to somebody else in Langebaan. In Langebaan, the connection said no, sorry. And obviously driving, he's scratching around in the car looking for things, and under the seat there was a whole lot of Namibian dollars. So what's the obvious decision one makes? You go to Namibia. And we were on our way to Namibia, and in Malmesbury, just before Malmesbury, I see these helicopters and funny looking cars all over the place, and the next thing we are pulled off, and we were arrested for the bucket that we stole. Went to Malmesbury prison for a while, and then got transported back to Knysna. And standing in the court after waiting trial for some time, the person that I was with admitted guilt, and he said it was his idea. He stole the bucket, whatever. Long story short, standing in the court, because of my prior convictions, the magistrate told me, Mr. Van Staden, we see here that you've had numerous opportunities to rehabilitate yourself, and you didn't use any of them. So the court deems you unrehabilitatable. So the whole rehab option fell wayside for me, and I was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment again for motor vehicle theft. And the reason I was sentenced is because I had prior convictions, and the person that was with me didn't have any convictions, so they thought that I influenced him. Long story short, anyway. And in that time, prison, I can't really talk about prison because prison to me was just another institution. I grew up in institutions most of my life, and you learn to live there. You learn to function as optimal as possible. I think you know where your place is, and as long as you don't overstep those boundaries, everything's fine. I think very often people say that you have to survive in prison. You have to do. Actually, you just have to be yourself and know your place. You have to know your place. You have to know your role within that system. And I spent another 2 years in prison. I was sentenced according to Article 216I that says that you only serve a certain percentage of your sentence and then you get released on correctional services. And upon my release, I got a accommodation at a friend of mine that I made friends with at the rehab and started working as a chef, waiter, come whatever. And I think the thing that got to me then is that I had to go and do my correctional supervision punishment, and the punishment was washing fire trucks, and I didn't really enjoy this. It wasn't something that this wasn't something that I would write home about. So I phoned Lynn, the director of Serenity, again, and I told her I would like to come back if she can make a plan. And once again, my sentence got converted that I do my correctional service, my house arrest at Serenity, and everything went fine. Yeah, everything went hunky-dory. I landed up being there for another 5 years, and this time I actually wanted to be there, strangely enough. I felt I had a purpose. I felt people needed me, and I felt I had something to say to them. And during this time, I met my wife. I wasn't a patient at the time. I was a lay counselor, if one wants to call it that. And I started dating my wife. I remember going to her house the first time. I told her this is going to be very difficult because I'm still under house arrest, and the correctional services guys have to come and see that I'm there. And when I got to her house, I tried to explain to her dad who I am and what I've done and why those guys are coming there. And one could see that he wasn't really impressed, but so be it. We've been together for a couple of years now. We've got 3 beautiful children, and life's great in some ways. I think everybody has their battles and their differences. But in general, I think for the first time in my life, I felt that I belonged. I felt that I was home. And I've delved into many different religions in my life. I've delved into many different cults. I've been a Buddhist. I've been a freaking Christian. I've been a Satanist. I've been everything. And it's always been about finding a place to belong. And often people ask me, but what about God in your life? And I think I believe in God, but it's a God of my understanding, like the inner book says. It's not the traditional going to church sort of God. And if I look at my life, I've been blessed. I've been carried. I've been looked after, and very often it's not my own doing. The fact that I'm standing here today and talking to you, if I have to say that this step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is what I did to get to where I am, it wouldn't be true. It wouldn't. I've just lived life. I've taken every day as it comes, and I try and overcome the obstacles as they arrive. Very often I fail. Very often I fail. At this present point of time, I'm self-employed and have been self-employed for the last 5 years. And with the whole pandemic and everything, it's become extremely difficult providing for one's family. And I do maintenance and alterations, and I do woodwork and anything I can get myself to do. I'm self-taught in most things, so it makes it even more difficult getting work, I think. People want papers, they want references. I've got a lot of references, but yeah, life has become difficult. About 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer, and I tried to hide it from people at first. I didn't want to bother them. I didn't want them to be worried about me, and I didn't want them to make a fuss about it. Because as I just said, I live life on a daily basis, and very often I just, push it to the side. My body aches, it's sore, it's what happens. I can't get treatment because apparently it's in my lining, whatever, long story short. I don't put too much energy in it. I do believe, as my life has been, things will work out as they should. They never work out for the bad. And I think what I want to say today is that if you're in a situation where you feel like giving up hope and you feel like giving in, just think of me and my life story. I can add many different aspects to this. I belong to gangs. There's many different things to this.